My name is Trey Schaefer. I'm a senior partner with Environmental Resources Management, and I'm also the SPE HSSE SR Technical Director, representing this discipline at the Board of Director level for the SPE organization. So Dr. Cross earned a bachelor degree from Colorado State University, and she received her PhD in sociology from the University of California at Davis. Her areas of expertise include conservation, community development, professional social networks, social norms, and behavior change. And she's going to share a few thoughts with us on the subject of trust and place attachment.
Trey, one of the reasons that he invited me, my TED Talk is called The 3 Myths of Behavior Change. And I started giving that talk because I am faced with people who are trying to do good in the world in all kinds of places. And I'm so frustrated as a sociologist because I see them not using the tools and knowledge that we have. And so one of those is that people have this typical conception that they want people to engage in some new behavior. And that's, a whole host of things, from we want people to recycle more to we want them to conserve energy to we want them, not to file lawsuits when we're doing environmental planning. So how do we get people to engage in these behaviors that we want? And we have this tendency to think that information is the strategy. If we just educate people, if they knew more, if they had different information, then they would do what we want them to. And so the TED Talk is really about how information is never enough. It's true that people need information, so information is necessary, but information alone is not sufficient. People need information in particular ways. They need it from trusted sources, they need it packaged in particular ways. One of my favorites is one that's not really in practice, but we have really good experimental research on it. People across the country are doing home energy audits, and they're trying to get people to weather strip their homes, and they say, oh, here are all the places you could do it, and people don't do it. But if you, instead of telling people there are 8 cracks in your windows that are letting cold air in, if you translate that into a hole the size of a basketball and say your house has a hole equivalent to the size of a basketball in your wall, if you weather strip these windows, people take action, and it triples or quadruples the number of people that take action. And when you want to think about how do we engage people better, how do we get over the conflict that naturally occurs when we're having big energy booms, the first thing you need to know is that there are unique things happening in boomtowns. They are unique cultural spaces. What's happening during times of rapid growth, so like 5 to 8% annually, which turns into like a doubling of population in a decade, is considered rapid growth. Growth at that rate decreases social cohesion, it increases conflict, it increases fear of crime, it increases distrust of your neighbors. Even if it's still safe, even if the crime rate remains the same, even if crime rate goes down, people perceive their place to be different, and so they act differently. So that's the context when we're thinking about boomtowns. You need to know that people are afraid and unsteady, and they feel the social fabric changing. So we're going to talk about place attachment. Human beings naturally get attached to places, to the natural world. And this is something that I've been doing research on for almost 20 years now. People get attached to places in multiple ways. So this is the interesting thing. Here's a list of 6 ways that people get attached. Every one of you probably has an attachment to a place in more than one of these ways. They are unique, but they are not mutually exclusive. Each one of these is a different process, and each process changes differently over time. So we're going to think about what each of these are and then what the implications are. So this is the first one. Everybody learns about places through names and through stories. When I was in college, I'm from Fort Collins, Colorado, I was a raft guide, and on the Poudre River, there's a place where we put the rafts in, and the name of that place where we load rafts into the river is called the Dead Deer Put-In. Yeah, it's called Dead Deer because one year there was a deer that was dead there, and that name stuck ever after. So places have names that embody the history and our history and experience there. Stories and narratives are one of the places that we all learn about places, and those stories are good, bad, funny. They connect us to other people and to our own experience. When we spend time in a place, we develop biographical attachments. There's one group of people that don't have these very robustly in the US, and those are military brats, because they don't stay in a place longer than 2 or 3 years, and so they have tiny short stories with lots of places. But most of us spend time in a place and develop a story and history there. So a woman who grew up in LA and moved to Nevada County, California, which is a rural place, in her early 20s as part of the Back to the Land movement in the 70s, said this: "I built 2 houses there and bought my 3rd. I've basically lived there half my life, and you know it's home. This place is just home, more than LA ever was. Although I'm comfortable in big cities, this is home. It's part of my identity." This one, spiritual, is one of my favorites. It's tricky to figure out what the right word is for this attachment. It's not about religion, it's not about spirituality in that sense. It's about your essence, your spirit as a person. This one's kind of the most unusual. It does not change over time. It does not go away. Have any of you ever been to a place and felt yourself immediately a sense of belonging? That place is where you should be, where you belong. I see you guys nodding, yeah. So that deep sense of belonging is something that some people experience. You don't choose it, it doesn't change, and it doesn't go away. Ideological. This one's super interesting to me. This one can be connected to religion, but it's equally not related to religion. Some people have decided that they have an ethic, a sense of stewardship, that they feel like it's their job to protect and care for a place. And so they make a commitment to that place over other places. This woman, Hannah, talks about how when she was moving around, she and her husband moved for jobs because the industry required them to do that. And eventually they settled in Grass Valley and they decided to stop doing that. And they said, if his job dried up and blew away, the first line of defense in that situation is not to move. We would do whatever it takes to stay here. And in fact, they did. He lived in an RV in a parking lot in Silicon Valley for a few years to have a job so they could stay there, and he eventually got a job back in Grass Valley. This is the polar opposite of that. This is a totally intellectual connection to place. All of us do this. College students do it. You're moving for a new job. The first thing you do is a mental assessment. What is this place like compared to what I really want? What is the ideal place that I want? This one, hopefully, wanes over time as your biographical attachment grows over time. But all of us do this. This one is one of the most diverse dependents. People are dependent on places for all kinds of social and material things. So that guy who has a commodified, he's assessing whether UC Davis is better than Toronto, right? He also is dependent on those places. So people whose jobs tie them to a place are dependent. This woman is dependent on her husband's choice of where he wanted to live. I love how she says, he physically selected this area and he dragged me here kicking and screaming. She's not the only woman I heard that from. All children are dependent on their parents for the place that they live. Many elderly are also dependent. What they're dependent on is not a job, but the care and social connections that exist in a place. I was telling one of my colleagues about this type, and she said, "Oh my gosh, this is why I resent Fort Collins. My mother's here, and she needs me to take care of her, and it means I'm not just free to go get a job any place I want, any kind of job I want. I have to stay here and care for a family." So we all have the potential to experience this. All of us have experienced dependence in some degree or another at some point in our lives, that we rely on the material conditions of a place or people. Okay, so these are the ways we get connected. Every one of us has our own constellation of these, and we associate different meanings with these. So when we think about conflict and we think about what's going on when a place is changing rapidly, people are trying to protect their place. But what people are protecting is different. Not everyone is trying to protect the same thing. So in California, there are lots of debates over let's have a historic district, or let's designate a river as wild and scenic, or let's designate a highway as scenic. And some people love that because it puts restrictions on it and protects the conditions at that time. Which of those 6 things that I just described to you, which group do you think really loves protections, regulations? What's that? Biographical. No. People think it's them. It's the commodified folks. The commodified folks moved there for a set of things, and they want to keep those things. People who have biographical are used to having freedom, and they're used to that place changing. They are usually more resistant to regulations, and this counterintuitive thing creates confusion and frustration when communities are debating. They're like, shouldn't the old-timers want regulations? We're trying to protect it for them. And the old-timers see regulations as threatening their independence and control. Having control over your home is one of the fundamental natures of feeling at home. And so people with different senses of attachment perceive regulations, threat, population growth. Some people perceive those as good things. Other people perceive those as bad things. So what do we do with this? The best thing to do is to try to understand what people are saying is at risk, and recognizing that different people in the same community who might both equally describe that they love their place and they want to protect it, you've got to ask the question, what are they trying to protect? There's two big ideas today. That's the first one. People have different attachments, and to engage with them, you got to understand what's at stake for them. So now let's think about, what do sociologists know about community engagement? And this is the framework that I like to use. There are several frameworks, but when we're trying to engage communities, if you're not addressing all 6 of these things, you're missing the boat, and you're going to have people who are frustrated. I'm going to talk mostly about 2 of them, the biggest ones that I've pulled out here, governance and trust, and talk about how do we really engender trust with people who are strangers that we don't have long-term relationships with. But I'm going to make a couple notes about education. Remember, before I started this talk, I was talking about information, right? People do need education and information, but they need it from trusted sources. And so they want information to come from groups that they trust, and so some groups are not as trusted as others. When that data is publicly available and transparent, it's more trustworthy. And when it comes from trusted sources, people are more willing to accept the same information. So information is not the same from every group, and that's something that you need to know about. People are also always assessing the authority of the speaker and of whoever is sharing that information. So that's something we need to think about. What is your authority to talk about it? And do I trust you as a source for that information? So now let's talk about building trust. This one is a little bit of a joke. It's just really kind of an oversimplification, but the truth is, in order to build trust with people, you have to make friends. You have to be a human being and show up like a normal person. You have to share. You need to make more friends because groups have more influence than one person does. And you'll have much more success if you ask for small favors before you ask for big favors. There's a ton of psychological research on that last one. I won't bore you with all the hilarious experiments that have been done. So what do logging and blueberry pies have to do with each other? When I was doing research in Nevada County, I talked to a guy who was a logger, and he said that this thing, reciprocity, was the one thing that really made him mad at his neighbors. He grew up in rural Nevada County that had like 25,000 people in the 1970s, and by 1980 it had 50,000. By 1990 it had 75,000, and he said, they don't get this idea, reciprocity. It's not like for like. It's me giving what's easy for me to give to you, and you giving what's easy for you to give to me, and they both have value. I'm a logger, you're an old lady, you need your tree cut down. I'm offended that you didn't ask me. You are an awesome baker. I can't bake. Bake me a blueberry pie. I will trade you a pie for a tree any day of the week. So reciprocity happens everywhere. People want it and they need it. The exchange of value is not about the equivalence of the value. It's about the meaning of the person who receives it. This is the most underestimated, biggest social influence, other people. Our social groups, the people that are close to us, our friends, our neighbors, people who are like us, are the people that we trust. They have the greatest power to influence you. So remember the first slide said make friends, right? So be personable, make friends. This is make more friends, right? Make friends with groups and let groups carry your message, because they will do a better job than you. They understand people better, they're more trusted, and they have a greater influence. You know, we're so busy teaching our teenagers not to be, swayed by their peers, but there are dozens of psychological studies that show that social groups have the biggest influence on us. So figure out how to use them and don't neglect them, because they're super powerful. All right, commitment and consistency. This is from the literature about persuasion and about trust. So the tiny fishbowl is like, ask for a tiny favor first before you get a big one. People also, this thing about building trust is that people want to be consistent themselves. So if they've made a public statement about an issue in one way, it's going to be very hard to get them to change, to do something else, because we like to appear consistent. We also expect people that are trying to persuade us to be consistent. If you said you love the water, I want you to still love the water. So there's lots of research kind of bound up in this one, but if you want people to make a commitment to making change, just ask them for a tiny favor first. So psychologists love to do little studies like this, like they want to ask people to do something totally outrageous. They ask them first to help them tie their shoe, oh, I can't bend down, can you help me tie my shoe? And the person does, and then they ask them for something really outrageous that you would never do to a stranger, and they do, because they've already helped you once. So it's this crazy thing. Human beings like to help each other, and if someone helps you once, they'll be more likely to help you again. Okay, just a little review. Remember I said make friends, share, make more friends. So these are the basic things that help build trust. We trust people who are like us, who look like us, who share our interests. So if you don't share with people who you are and what you care about, your potential to influence them is really small. You have to be giving something, but you can be giving a tree or a pie. It really doesn't matter as long as you're giving something. So think about how these things might work in the world that you work in. So this is my last point, and then I'm done. Governance is one of the last pieces of the pie on community engagement. It's one of the most important things, and it's often neglected when we're thinking about how do we engage with communities, how do we create social license to operate, how people make decisions about what's happening in their community matters. The process of decision making makes a difference. So when we think about process, sociologists call this procedural justice. And my favorite example of this is with police officers. Nobody likes to get tickets, right? And cops are convinced that no matter what they say to you, you're going to be mad at them for giving you a ticket. But my colleagues do research on this, and they've surveyed people all over the state, and what they find is that the more police officers adhere to the predictable script, to what they're expected to do, the better they are at that communication, the less mad people are at them. And it doesn't matter. You can have a really bad ticket. You can lose your license. You can get 12 points. As long as the cop followed the process that you expect, people are not mad. And that's kind of astounding to people because we think that bad news is going to make people mad. The truth is the process through which you tell people and make decisions is what really makes the difference. So people need transparency and they need predictability in those processes. And just to tie this back to what we started with about place, when we're thinking about any kind of community development, whether it's urban revitalization or energy development, people are invested in protecting their place. They care about the health and social well-being of themselves and their friends and their neighbors. So you've got to think about what the gift is, what people are getting from that contributes to these things, and you cannot diminish their concern or their fear that these things are being threatened.